In a murky drainage canal, a gruesome discovery was made. The lifeless body of a woman, savagely stabbed 83 times. The sheer brutality of the crime left no room for doubt. This was not an ordinary murder. Who was she? And who could have harbored such unspeakable rage to kill in such a monstrous way? The body's identity remained a mystery, but one thing was certain. Someone had gone to horrific lengths to make sure she would never be found alive. What kind of person could do something like this? Was it a random act of violence, or did someone close to her carry out this vicious crime? As the investigation unfolded, every shocking detail brought more questions, but few answers. Who was the woman floating in the canal, and what terrible secret led to her untimely death? But before we dive into it, I'd like to ask a small favor. The statistics show that more than 70% of you watching aren't subscribed to the channel yet. If you're enjoying these deep dives into true crime and want to stay updated on future videos, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel and ensures you don't miss out on any new cases. Now, without further ado, let's get back to the case. Doris Carell, a 45-year-old woman, had reached a turning point in her life by December 1996, though not in the way anyone would hope. Living with her boyfriend, Stephen Ford, in St. Petersburg, Florida, Doris's once stable life had started to spiral out of control. Friends, neighbors, and those who knew her well noticed the changes. Doris was no longer the carefree woman they remembered. Instead, she was anxious, withdrawn, and often seemed preoccupied with worries she wouldn't fully share. According to close acquaintances, much of this anxiety stemmed from her relationship with Ford, which had become increasingly volatile. What had once been a seemingly normal partnership had turned into a daily battle of tension, arguments, and uncertainty. Financial problems added a constant strain, but it was the domestic issues that truly weighed on Doris. Confiding in friends, she expressed that the man she once trusted had become a source of fear. She spoke, almost cryptically at times, about Ford's temper. She was walking on eggshells, afraid that one wrong move might set him off. The tension had grown so thick, it seemed like only a matter of time before something snapped. The arguments, which had become a regular occurrence, had started escalating. Minor disagreements turned into loud, heated disputes. Doris's friends and neighbors couldn't help but notice the rising frequency of their fights, and while Doris tried to keep her fear hidden, it was clear to those closest to her that she was struggling. And then, December 8th, 1996, arrived, a date that would forever change the course of her life. On this night, Ford claimed, they had yet another argument. To Ford, it was nothing out of the ordinary, just another fight in a string of many. However, this argument seemed to shake Doris more than usual. According to Ford's version of events, after the heated exchange, Doris did something completely uncharacteristic. She left the house to go shopping without so much as a word. It was late, and this impulsive decision didn't align with the cautious, reserved Doris her friends knew. Ford told authorities that he didn't think much of it at the time, explaining that it wasn't unusual for Doris to take off after an argument. But something about this departure didn't sit right. It's almost as though he was brushing off a growing storm, unaware of, or unwilling to acknowledge, the brewing danger. What exactly happened during that argument? What words were exchanged that drove Doris to leave in such a state of distress? That's a question that would remain unanswered for some time. The next morning, December 9th, came with a chilling silence. Doris failed to show up for work, something completely unlike her. She was known for being dependable and organized, someone who wouldn't skip work without notifying her colleagues. Her absence didn't go unnoticed. As the hours ticked by and there was still no sign of her, the concern grew. Calls to her home went unanswered. Her colleagues, who had grown to rely on Doris's consistent presence, began to worry that something was terribly wrong. At this point, her friends were hopeful that maybe she'd just taken some time to cool off, to escape the escalating tensions at home. But as more time passed, the optimism started to wane. By December 11th, there was still no trace of Doris, and her absence had now escalated into something far more alarming. Then came the phone call, a call that would set off even more red flags. On December 11th, Doris's daughter, who lived in Maryland, received a troubling phone call from none other than Stephen Ford. He asked her if she had seen or heard from her mother, a question that sent chills down her spine. Why, she wondered, hadn't Ford been able to explain where her mother was? How could the man living with her mother be so uncertain of her whereabouts? At this moment, the daughter's concern turned into fear. The situation was far more dire than she had imagined. It wasn't just a case of her mother needing time to herself. Something was wrong, very wrong. The fear took root, and on December 12th, Doris's daughter reported her mother missing to local authorities. The formal investigation had begun, and the race to find Doris was now on. From the very start, the authorities were concerned about Stephen Ford's behavior. While he initially seemed cooperative, offering information about Doris's sudden departure on the night of December 8th, his vague and inconsistent statements quickly caught the attention of investigators. Ford claimed that after their argument, Doris had simply left the house to go shopping and never returned. However, he seemed indifferent to the fact that she had been missing for several days by the time her daughter reported her absence. Ford's lack of urgency in reporting her missing, along with his conflicting stories, raised suspicions almost immediately. Just days after Doris was officially reported missing, on December 15, 1996, a body was discovered floating face down in a drainage canal near US 41 in Palmetto, Florida. Local divers retrieved the body, which was that of an unidentified white female wearing a gold ring on her right index finger. The trauma to her neck and face suggested foul play. Despite this, her identity remained unknown at the time, and the authorities proceeded with caution, gathering as much evidence as they could. The medical examiner performed an autopsy on December 16th, which revealed the brutal nature of the crime. The woman had been stabbed 83 times across her body. There were no signs of sexual assault, and the absence of water in her lungs suggested that she had been killed before her body was disposed of in the canal. However, authorities did not immediately link the unidentified body to Doris Corll, as the body had not yet been identified. As the investigation continued, Stephen Ford's behavior became even more alarming. On December 18th, detectives found Doris's red Mazda RX-7 abandoned at Pinellas Square Mall. This discovery was critical, yet perplexing. The car showed no obvious signs of struggle or foul play, and there was no physical evidence to suggest that something violent had occurred inside it. However, detectives suspected that Ford might have driven the car to the mall himself and cleaned it to erase any potential evidence. Though the theory was plausible, there was no direct proof linking Ford to this action at the time. As authorities kept a close eye on Ford, they noticed his actions growing more suspicious. In the days following Doris's disappearance, Ford had moved some of her personal belongings, including her jewelry, clothing, and photos, into a storage unit. This raised serious concerns among the investigators, as it seemed like an attempt to erase her presence from their shared home. Ford's reasoning, that he didn't want Doris's daughter to have access to her mother's things, seemed flimsy at best, further cementing detectives' suspicions. Then, detectives noticed a disturbing new development when they returned to Ford's home for a follow-up. A strong odor of decomposition was emanating from the residence, and new stains had appeared on the bed and mattress, stains that had not been present during their previous searches. These details were troubling, hinting that something may have happened to Doris inside their home, but they still lacked direct physical evidence to link Ford to her murder. Perhaps the most telling sign of Ford's guilt came from his suicidal behavior in the weeks following Doris's disappearance. Not once, but twice, Ford attempted to take his own life. In the first instance, investigators found a suicide note under a stuffed cat in his home, where Ford expressed a desire to be with Doris if she were dead. The note was disturbing and cryptic, hinting that he was grappling with immense guilt. Soon after, detectives visited Ford's residence for a follow-up interview. To their horror, they found Ford lying semi-conscious in bed, foaming at the mouth after ingesting liquid bleach in another apparent suicide attempt. This incident left little doubt that Ford was hiding something. His suicide attempts were interpreted as an indirect admission of guilt, and his behavior demonstrated a pattern of mental and emotional distress following Doris's disappearance. The investigators viewed this as evidence of Ford's consciousness of guilt, but without solid forensic evidence, they were unable to arrest him at the time. By May 1997, authorities officially identified the body found in the drainage canal as Doris Corll through dental records. This was a major breakthrough, but the investigation reached a standstill. Despite the growing suspicion surrounding Stephen Ford, law enforcement lacked the physical evidence necessary to charge him with the crime. The stains found in Ford's home, his conflicting stories, and his suicide attempts were compelling, but they weren't enough to bring the case to trial. After Doris's body was identified, Ford relocated from Florida to Delaware, seemingly leaving his troubled past behind. With no direct witnesses to the murder and no forensic evidence that definitively linked Ford to the crime, the case went cold. For more than 20 years, Doris's murder remained unsolved, a source of pain and frustration for her family and the authorities who had worked so hard to bring her justice. In 2017, a detective from the Manatee County Cold Case Unit decided to revisit Doris Corll's case, hoping that advancements in forensic science could help shed new light on the evidence. Over the next several years, detectives re-examined the files, re-interviewed witnesses, and, most importantly, retested physical evidence that had been collected during the original investigation. In 2024, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement conducted new DNA tests on swabs taken from Doris's body during the 1997 autopsy. The results were telling. No foreign DNA was found, effectively ruling out the possibility that Doris had been sexually assaulted by an unknown assailant. This critical finding supported the theory that her murder was likely committed by someone she knew, namely Stephen Ford. Detectives also learned that Doris had confided in friends about her fears of Ford in the months leading up to her death. She had spoken about their domestic problems and expressed concerns for her safety, adding yet another layer of suspicion to Ford's involvement. Furthermore, the stains on Ford's bed sheets were confirmed to be from his earlier suicide attempt, deepening the case against him. With this new evidence in hand, authorities felt they finally had enough to arrest Stephen Ford for Doris Corll's murder. On August 16, 2024, Ford was arrested in Delaware during a routine traffic stop, nearly 28 years after Doris's death. The Florida Cold Case Investigations Unit, working alongside the Manatee County Sheriff's Office, ensured that Ford was extradited back to Florida, where he was charged with second-degree murder. Upon his arrest, Ford made a cryptic statement saying, "My past has come up to haunt me." Although this wasn't a direct confession, it was yet another indication that he had been carrying the weight of guilt for nearly 3 decades. Prosecutors were confident that the circumstantial evidence, along with Ford's suicide attempts and his suspicious actions, would lead to a conviction. As the case moved forward, prosecutors built their case around Ford's erratic behavior, his attempts to cover up the crime, and the forensic evidence that ruled out other suspects. While the case remains largely circumstantial, they believe that Ford's actions in the aftermath of Doris's disappearance, his cryptic statements, the moving of her belongings, and his repeated suicide attempts, create a compelling narrative of guilt. This case also serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of cold case investigations and the persistence of law enforcement in seeking justice for victims, even after decades. Doris Carell's case, once cold and nearly forgotten, was brought back to life through advances in forensic science and the tireless efforts of investigators who refused to let her story fade away. The arrest of Stephen Ford after 28 years highlights how modern forensic tools, such as DNA testing, can help close the gaps in unsolved cases. For the family of Doris Carell, Ford's arrest has brought long-awaited relief and the possibility of closure. Doris's daughter, who reported her mother missing in 1996, can finally hope for justice to be served. Although the pain of losing her mother remains, the idea that Ford will now stand trial brings a sense of accountability that was missing for so long. In a broader context, this case underscores the necessity of continually investing in cold case units and forensic technologies. It shows that, while justice may be delayed, it is not beyond reach, even in cases where there seems to be little hope of resolution. The advancements in DNA technology and the renewed investigative focus on long-dormant cases have the potential to provide justice to other families in similar situations. Beyond the forensic and legal significance, the case also sheds light on the often hidden dangers of domestic violence. Doris Carell's fear of her partner and her untimely death emphasize the real and pressing need to address domestic abuse before it escalates into something far more tragic. Doris had confided in her friends about her fears, but her story ended in a brutal and violent murder. This serves as a reminder of how important it is for communities and individuals to take domestic violence seriously and offer support to those who feel threatened. As Stephen Ford's trial unfolds, it will be watched closely, not only by Doris's family, but by the public, who seek to understand how justice can finally be achieved in a case that spanned nearly 3 decades. Regardless of the outcome, the reopening of Doris Carell's case has already served as a crucial example of what is possible when cold cases are revisited with fresh perspectives and new technology. The eventual resolution of this case will stand as a testament to the perseverance of law enforcement and the lasting importance of seeking justice for all victims, no matter how much time has passed. Now, as we await the verdict, we're left with lingering questions. What drove Ford to keep this secret for nearly 30 years? Could there be more to the story than what has come to light? And what about other cold cases like Doris Carell's? How many more are still waiting for justice? These are questions that only time, and perhaps the court, can answer. What do you think? Was it a matter of guilt finally catching up with Stephen Ford, or do you believe there's more that we still don't know about that fateful night? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your take on this case. And if you found this video compelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon so you'll be notified every time we post a new case. Your support helps keep this channel going and ensures you don't miss out on any upcoming true crime stories. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.